Today we're looking at this, which is definitely not a Hario V60, even though it really looks like one. This is the Hario Pegasus. It's currently only available in Japan, comes in at about 600 yen. By the time it makes its way over to the US, it's probably going to cost about 15 bucks. So it's very cheap, and this may be hard to believe, but in some ways this actually improves on the legendary V60, which is probably the most standard pour over brewer that there is. Now, I'm going to show you in a rather brutal way how the Pegasus improves on the V60. We're going to do a taste test, and in the process of that, I'm going to give you a very simple recipe that you can use. And then after that, I'm going to give you a full brew guide, the way that I brew coffee on the daily with my routine. So I have a normal V60 right here. This is actually after my Chemex. This was the very first pour over dripper that I got, this exact one. So if anybody ever comes and takes it, I'm gonna be very upset. Now you can see both look very similar. They kind of have this spiral pattern. Both these ones are made out of plastic, which I like because you can drop them and you're never gonna worry about it. Also great for heat. But when you look inside, that's when they start to differ. The V60 has kind of this larger hole down here in the middle, and this one has these two little holes. This one also takes a trapezoidal filter, while the V60 takes a conical filter. Now both these are O2 size, and I'm using the Hario filters for both. Now the V60, it is probably the standard for pour over drippers, especially for conical pour over drippers, as far as anything goes. However, it also has a bit of a reputation for being difficult to get consistent results out of, especially when you start out. And when I first got this, I really struggled to get consistent results out of it. And let me show you why. I was using one of these. Now, if you are getting into pour over, do yourself a favor, get a nice little hand grinder, burr grinder. It doesn't have to be expensive. Please don't use one of these because you'll beat your head against the wall. But for the purposes of this video, I am going to relive my past trauma for your sake. I feel really weird putting this thing on a scale and weighing out coffee, but I'm gonna weigh out about 16 grams of coffee. Now, if you do have one of these, at least shake it while you're grinding, because that'll really kind of help prevent some of those really dusty particles that are going to mess up your brew from accumulating too much. This is like the cocktail of pain for specialty coffee people. Okay, so I'm going to brew on both the Pegasus and the V60. Then we're going to do a blind taste test, and we're going to see if I can tell the difference. The Pegasus is billed kind of as being a bit of a more forgiving and more consistent brewer than the V60. So we're gonna try it out. And I'm also gonna grind up the grinds for the V60. All right, so I'm gonna keep the recipe really basic. So I'm gonna do a Bloom 50 ml pour, and then I'm gonna wait 30 seconds. That kind of lets the beans off gas a little bit, get rid of some of that nastiness from the roasting process. And then I'm just gonna do a slow single pour all the way up to 250 mils. And I'm gonna do the same thing with the V60. Now that two-hole design on the Pegasus is kind of designed to slow the flow down initially, but it still flows pretty well. And it's designed to kind of control that flow a little bit. So even if your pour isn't perfect, your grind's not perfect, it's going to give you a pretty consistent drawdown. This one is almost done. It's looking like we're gonna have a brew time at just under 3 minutes, which miraculously is exactly what I would hope for on a brewer like this with this type of recipe. The V60, it tends to kind of stall out at the end. And I'm starting to see that here. It's really starting to slow down, and it flowed really quick at the beginning, and it's slowing right down here at the end. So we'll let them finish up, and then we'll give them a taste. Okay, so I got some cups here. One of them, this one, has some tape on the bottom, and I'm just gonna mix these up a bunch of times. Let's taste these and see how they turned out. Okay. Pretty good. Okay, so this one right here is a lot more balanced than this one. It's sweeter, it has that iconic V60 flavor, but this one, it's just a little more edgy. So I'm gonna guess that this one is the Pegasus. Let's see if it is. And it is. You know, it seems like every other week you see a new pour over dripper hit the market. A lot of them though tend to be pretty expensive. So to see one that is this easy to use, this forgiving, it's refreshing. I like that there is a low cost option that I can recommend and be reasonably sure that whatever else people have going on, they're likely gonna have a good pour over experience. And if you're already way down the pour over rabbit hole, I would say it's 15 bucks. Just go and get it, try it, it's fun. It's nice to have another weapon in your arsenal just to mess around with. But especially if you're just getting into this. This has easily become my top recommendation for people just getting started in pour over. Now, I've gone the other way too with this, and I've used a $3,000 grinder, top quality beans, perfect pouring, and it does a great cup. Like, it's very similar to the taste that you get out of a V60. Now, when I'm brewing daily, I'm gonna give you the recipe that I use. Simple, I don't go in for the super complicated recipes. Very often there's kids running around, so I like it simple. I use a 16-gram dry dose of coffee, and then I do what's called a bloom pour for 50 milliliters, and I let that sit for the first 30 seconds. Then at the 30-second mark, I do a second pour, and I pour an extra 100 mils of water up to a total volume of 150 mils or grams, and then I let that sit until the 1 minute and 15-second mark, and then I do my final pour. Another 100-gram pour up to a total 250 mils. Now, depending on the coffee, it'll time out somewhere maybe between 215 all the way up to 315, somewhere in there. You know, that is really going to depend on the coffee that you're drinking as to how it's going to taste the best, but that's what I do daily. James Hoffman also has a great V60 recipe. I would recommend going to try that. I would say anything that you would do on a V60, you can translate 1-to-1 on this brewer. You know, if you want to pour in ovals instead of circles, that's fine. I have been pouring in circles and it just seems to work. Now, I want to know what you think of this new pour over brewer from Hario. Do you like it? Do you think the new design is a bit of a gimmick? Is this something that you would consider? Are you just starting out, or would you call yourself an advanced pour over person? I want to hear from you in the comments. I hope your next cup of coffee is fantastic. And just a reminder, the best upgrade you can make is fantastic coffee. So make sure you're drinking something good, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.